Okay, so I want to welcome everyone to week 17, I think, of xEssentials. Tonight's exciting topic, doing a display or drive-through for a church or charity. Don has done one at his church for a couple of years now, I think, Don?
Eight years now.
For 8 years. So he's got the floor and he's going to share with us, what they've done. So hopefully inspires a lot of good ideas and a lot of folks to do something for a charitable cause. Thanks.
Hey, you guys ready? You wanted me to give a little rundown of me and my history, or you just want to go for the presentation?
Yeah, you can start with your history background.
Okay. So my desire for Christmas lights started way back when I was a little kid. So, watching my dad hang the C9 lights on the roof of the house. And for me, motion was the twinkle lights on the C9s. That was just, as a 6-year-old, that was just fantastic to me. And I used to lay underneath the Christmas tree, watch TV, and just look up all the lights. So I've been a light fanatic since I was a child. Always doing static stuff on my house, just regular string lights. And then opportunity presented to itself, as I'll present to you guys here, to really change my life. And I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way, that once you've started doing Christmas lights, it kind of consumes your life. So if you guys are interested in the display that I work out, it's called Evergreen Church out of Bothell, Washington. You see the website there, christmas@evergreen.com. We have a lot of good video content there showing you what we do. First of all, I want to start with these two verses that I finally get to say out in public here. So I really believe for a Christian Christmas light display, you got to have a vision. So Proverbs 29:18 in the King James Version says, "Without vision, the people perish, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he." The NIV says it a little bit different, says, "Where there's no revelation, people cast off restraint, but blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instruction." So I want to keep that in your mind of vision through this whole presentation here. So I'm going to divide this into two parts here. So one, I'm going to tell you the history of evergreen lights. And then second half is my recommendations if you want to start your own display. So Evergreen Church was started in 1995. We were a church plant of a mega church. We're located in Bothell, Washington. And Bothell is a suburb of Seattle. If anybody's familiar with the Seattle area, there's a big, huge lake called Lake Washington. And Bothell's on the east side of the lake, we call it the North Shore area. So we're basically North Seattle area. So we were established in 1995. In 2005, the original pastor stepped down, and we struggled for 4 years with interim pastors. During that time, a lot of people left the church. It became kind of a dull, dying church, basically. And we realized we needed to hire a new pastor, somebody that would reinvigorate the church. So we sent out the presentation, and we found a candidate named Phil McCallum. So Phil's very first visit to our property was in February of 2009. And so when he first saw the church property, as the middle of dark winter, and we're on a 7-acre property just outside of a business park in a residential neighborhood in the Bothell area. It's an old farm. And it was just pitch black dark at night, and his heart just sank. And his first thought to himself was, "Oh Lord, this place needs Christmas lights. We need to light this place up and make it shine." And basically the history of the church, we were basically about 40% Swedish, 40% Norwegian, and 10% everybody else. So it had a very staunch, conservative, I want to say stick in the mud type atmosphere, where we really weren't open to anything out of the norm. The church we came through, we did a lot of Christmas concerts and such, but that really didn't drive new attendees to our church. So there was a need for a paradigm shift. So with the acceptance of the new pastor, a lot of people didn't like the change. So basically we've had about 80% turnover of parishioners, just because, that's kind of where the direction got. I don't know if a lot of you go to church, you probably experienced some changes in your church too. Every time a pastor leaves, there's always kind of a shift of people. They don't like the new changes. People get set in their ways, right? So my pastor, Phil McCallum, he's a man of vision and prayer. He always has these ideas, and he goes and prays about it. He has a core team of men that we all get together once a month. And he goes, hey guys, here's what's on my mind. Let's all get together and pray about it. And before you know, 6 months, a year down the road, things start happening to that effect. So he's not just a man of prayer, but he's a man of action too. So things happen when he starts praying. History of Bothell. So Bothell was once home to the nation's largest living Christmas tree in our town square, according to Life magazine in 1962. So as I said, our church property, we originally stated, we had people who went to our church, lived on this 5-acre parcel that used to be a farm. And then they actually have a house on the corner. It's on a historical landmark, so we can't touch the exterior of the house. That has to be in place. But they had a barn where he stored his tractors and his old cars that I like to work on. And then we had a 5-acre field. Through the process of building the church, we were able to accommodate 2.5 more acres. People sold their houses to there, so that provided parking for us to build our new church building. I want to say the politics, the philosophy at the time of our local county and city ordinances, they didn't want any church that was going to stand out and look ugly in a residential neighborhood. Just 5 miles from our location, there's a huge mega church, and it looks like a big concrete Costco building. And they're very, very afraid to put that in a residential neighborhood. So our church design is, I don't say it stands out, but it looks like a residential building inside of a residential community. But because of that, through the original zoning, we were not allowed to place any illumination or signage on the street front or in the building. All we had was like a little 1 foot high by about 3 foot wide sign on the building that was kind of hid behind some bushes. So nobody knew what was in the building. People thought it was like a real estate office or a nursing home or something. So nobody knew, hey, that's a church there. So for us to get ourselves recognized in the community, we had to learn other ways to stand out. So as I said, the pastor, his first desire was to start putting Christmas lights on the building. So our first attempt at this, he got one of the parishioners and he went out and bought $600 worth of LED clear bulbs. And the guy sat there drinking beers in his man cave, screwing bulbs into strings for a couple, 3 nights. And we just put a line of strings around the top of the building perimeter. And then we used a gobo on the building to put signage on there saying, hey, there's something going on here. And I put a little note down here that says, Batman fan sees the Riddler signal. Well, what that was is we have a little boy, he's a young man now at the time. He is so excited to see this spotlight because he's a huge Batman fan. So he thought it was going to be the bat signal put on the building. So we ever did, 1, 2, 3 lights on. He turned around and he sees this big question mark. He's like, oh my God, it's the Riddler. What's the Riddler doing on my bat signal? So what our church does, I'm not sure how other people do discipleship training in their churches. We use a system called Alpha Training out of HSC Brompton in London. And it's dinner and a movie and conversation and a totally stress-free, relaxed atmosphere that basically introduces people to the concept of God, to decisions to accept Christ, on through accepting the Holy Spirit. So it's about a 6-8 week process, but it's very non-confrontational and just easy course to go through. So that was how our first foray into putting Christmas lights on our building. So we went through our first year, left the lights on the building. Nobody wanted to go up and take them down. And then about a year into it, after our Christmas, I think it was 2011-ish, our pastor Phil noticed a new parishioner come in through the building, doing a service by the name of Brian Sarase. So pastor told me that when he saw Brian walk in, it's like lightning bolts went over this guy's head, and he just felt the Lord speak to him, says, you need to take this guy to lunch. He just felt this urge. You got to take this guy to lunch. You got to get to know him. So Pastor invited Brian out to lunch, and they started, discussing hobbies, personalities, what's going on in their lives, etc. And Brian just happens to mention that he and his wife, they had just moved out of an old neighborhood and into a new HOA neighborhood where they weren't allowed to do any lights, and that he and his wife used to put animated Christmas lights on their home. and that he's also a devotee of Richard Holman. And Brian's wife and his wife's desire is that they're looking for a church that likes lights. So in the middle of this conversation, the pastor's going, wait a second, what did you say about Christmas lights? So as they have this discussion, all of a sudden in both of their hearts, they realize that this, I'm sure you guys who go to church understand, God's coincidences, that the dream came alive that we could put an animated light display on our church building. I put a note down here that Brian's wife, Amy, is the key to everything that's going to happen next. At this time, when this all started, Brian had 3 children under the age of 8. And once the Christmas season hit, Brian was spending 20 to 30 hours a week at the church, helping us set up the display, and pretty much every night, taking time away from his family. So, if you're a married couple with a wife and your husband's away for the entire month of December with young children, I'm sure that's a strain on the marriage. But Amy and Brian are very strong, committed to putting this display on together as a unit. So once they formulated that plan, they gave us a presentation during the church service going, hey, folks, here's an idea that's been birthed in our hearts. They showed us what he used to do on his home. He had some Vimeo of his house that he used to do. This is how we would love to do this on the church display. So then they offered to take volunteers. So when it was time for volunteers, I literally ran forward because I said, man, I got to be part of this. This is so cool. Wanted to add in something else here. So back in that 2011, 2000 time frame, people remember there was a house, I think it was back in the Midwest somewhere. It was they did the pumpkin mask with I'm Sexy and I Know It display on there. And I was watching that thing over and over and over going, man, that is so cool. I could never even imagine myself doing that. Well, here, a year later, I get wrapped into it. So be careful what you wish for. So after that was presentation, we assembled a core team in March of 2012. We developed a 2-part plan. Brian gave us ideas of what he wanted to see in the display. So he assigned team members that were going to build those separate props. And then me and another gentleman said, well, that's great. We're going to have this great big light show, but how are we going to greet everybody that comes to our campus? We have to have a way to greet these people. So that was a 2-part vision there. So we had to work with our pastors and hospitality staff to come up with a way to do that. And me and my big mouth shout off, like, how about we give away free cookies and cocoa? And that's turned into a huge, huge undertaking on our part now. Our frontage building, our elevation that we decorate, is about 200 feet wide and 40 foot tall. We were initially given a budget of $5,000. And so my question to you and how we do is, how do we adequately light that much area with extremely limited budget? So our first year, we chose to use all incandescent lights. I think we bought them from noveltylights.com. We had 40,000 plus lights. Most of them were C9s, and then on my mega arches, we used mini lights. Right here, I say the necessity is the mother of invention. Because of the budget constraints, we had to DIY everything that we built. And if any of you have been into my classes at a certain, convention during the summer, I've shown you that we took 1-inch PVC pipe and we actually cut the width out of the PVC pipe to be able to hold the C9 bulb plugs in there up straight. So that was, we paid a machinist $200 to cut them all up for us. So he did a really good job. Only problem is if you guys do something like that, it's very, very, very sharp and open to cutting and scraping. So be very careful you do something like that. So we need to create cheap and impactful props for our first year. So maybe some of you are familiar with the old tater twister method of making arches. So I followed Richard Holman, and there's another gentleman down in the south. I want to say it's Lauterbach or something like that, or Lynchburg. Wasn't Clyde, but there's a gentleman in the south who showed how to wrap arches using the tater twister. Well, what we did, we used the 20-foot long PVC poles, 1 inch wide, and the tater twister got about 3 strings of lights on it when it died. So basically what I had to do, I had to go out and buy a 1/2-inch drill motor, and I took a little 3-inch roller handle and cut it down, took the roller off, and used that to spin my PVC pipes to create my arches. And then again, I recommend it to anybody who wants to start a display or learn how to build stuff. I spent hours and hours and hours on YouTube watching how people made arches and other kinds of props. So our first year setup, we began in early September for a day after Thanksgiving launch date. We had a core team of 10, 12 people. We worked 5 to 6 hours on every Saturday and 2 to 3 hours on Sundays every weekend for 2.5 months. Even that we took that much time to create all the initial props, we were down to the wire. So it was Sunday before Thanksgiving. We actually got everything lit up for the first time. And I got to tell you guys, the first time you see your prop lit up, a tinge of joy comes to your heart. I mean, I'm sure you've all felt that. You're like, wow, it really works. That's really cool. And so when I first saw my mega arches go, I was almost in tears because all the heartache and the work and the screaming and the fights and the tantrums that got us to that point. It was just amazing to see. So me and a couple guys, we went out to dinner that night, and one of the families from the church saw us, and they nicknamed us the Evergreen Light Guys. So we're all there celebrating, hey, we finally got to go. Well, that was Sunday. So we had planned a launch day of the day after Thanksgiving that year, 2012. I want to say Murphy's Law. So if you're going to do any kind of Christmas light display, be prepared for Murphy's Law. It happens. Our first launch night, rainstorm. The plan was we were supposed to stand out in a wet lawn. As soon as we did the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown, the show came on, the sound system didn't work, computer crashed, everything didn't work. After 10, 15 minutes, we gave up and went home. It was just a colossal failure. So we basically all took a breath, went home, and came back the next night and said, okay, let's try again. Let's find out what happened and go, fix what didn't work the night before. So that next night, Saturday night, we began our hospitality program. And we asked people at the church to donate hot chocolate powder mix, apple cider mix, and cookies. And then we used our converted barn area to hand those out to attendees. So for the next month, our hospitality program consisted by using our small group program from our church. So, one say like Bible study team, they would take one night, et cetera, and they would work that night, and they work a couple nights, and that just kind of carried the load for us. A lot of people did not want to get out of their cars. And I put a saying here, church is scary. So people are going to think you're trying to invite them to your church. When you first see that, I mean, it's a big neon light going on, like, hey, let's go look at that. It's cool. But, oh my gosh, people are coming towards me. I'm scared. They're going to ask me to come to their church. So we knocked on a lot of car windows, and people would roll them down like 2 or 3 inches. And we had little the Brock's candy canes. We just offer people candy canes. Going, hey, welcome to the show. Turn the radio on, and if you want, come over here. We got some free cookies and cocoa. And 5-10 minutes later, all of a sudden they get out of the car and they come take a look. But a lot of them would just sit there because they didn't want to be proselytized. We also have, we tied in with our local police pretty well, and they would actually come up and take their breaks and watch our show with us. So I've just put a big highlight right here for danger cookies. So if you're going to offer cookies to the public, be very, very careful of what you're offering. Our very first hour, the very first night, we had a child had an allergic reaction to nuts, and it was a Costco tin of cookies. Nobody had any idea that there were nuts in there. And the family had no idea that their child had that allergy. So I was scared. I was working at, I was just scared spitless that we've hurt a child. And my biggest concern going into this thing was the liability that the church would be exposed to in asking all these people to come onto our property. So, they got the child taken care of. He came back. We looked at the box, saw that. And so we basically threw the cookies out so that we can't do that again. So that the next night, at church, the pastor asked everybody to start donating cookies without any nuts and hot cocoa powder to help supplement that through the remainder of the month. Our event is hosted nightly through Christmas Eve. And then after Christmas Eve, it runs autonomously through New Year's Day. So we used the gobo that first year that had the question mark in it. Our second year on our gobo spotlight, we put up a silhouette of the nativity scene. We had several people ask us, specifically some Korean folks, like, who's that lady with the baby? So we're dealing with people who have no concept of what Christ and Christmas are all about. They had no idea that that's Mary and Jesus up there on the wall. But to give you an example of how effective this is, so our church at the time ran about 500-600 people attending. Our first season, we had over 6,500 visitors come onto our church campus. That's a pretty good return. Okay, so after everything we took down our first year, we sat down a couple months later, had a debrief, figured out what worked, what didn't work, and let's plan to add something for next season. So out of the debrief, we decided to create a 40-foot long light tunnel that we could funnel people into our viewing and hospitality area. So I put a picture over here on the right. Some of you might recognize my friend Kevin Thomas there in the very flashy suit. And that was my light tunnel. And that light tunnel basically put me on the map for Christmas lights. Some of you may know Jay Danielson, who's been coming to some of our conventions. He's a part of our Northwest Mini group. And before the first time I got to teach at a associated convention, they had me practice it at the Northwest Mini. And he saw my name up on the, the lineup. I was like, who is this guy? Who's this guy I think he can teach? And all of a sudden he saw my tunnel. He goes, oh, you're that guy. So I was teasing my hereabouts. I said, yeah, I'm that guy. So like I said, this tunnel that I created has become one of the most popular spots in North Seattle area for family stay Christmas lights. So it's funny because some of you know I work for the Boeing company, and when I see people's Boeing email that you're allowed to put a little profile picture on there, a lot of them have the picture of themselves inside this tunnel. They have no idea that I built that or that I'm even associated with that. So I just find it amusing when I see on people's Facebook pages or on their profiles that tunnel. It's a pretty cool thing. So that next year, our core team was invited to join the Pacific Northwest Mini clap, that we call it. And I began developing relationships. I see right here with Kevin Thomas and Mark Zembrowski. They become two of my very best friends in the world. They're just great guys. Mark's former display and our display are 7 miles apart. So basically through the years, we developed the interaction relationship with each other. So, hey, you like our display? Go see Mark. Mark says, hey, you like my display? Go see Evergreen. So we just have a mutual enjoyment of each other's displays. Our first year too, we found out we had a problem with walkway lighting. You can see we're sitting on a little concrete pad there, and we had multiple pathways around the property that were totally in the dark. So it didn't delineate where people should be walking and getting in the mud and mess. So we made improvements to the walkway. We made we call it a Winter Wonderland walking path adjacent to my right there on the picture. We purchased some covered awnings for people to stand under because, like, you know, it does tend to rain a little bit in Seattle at times. And then another thing too that came out is garden scale trains. So the thing we did our first year of Christmas lights, our pastor encouraged us to get involved in ministries in the community. And one of our families started working with what's called the Santa Claus train, which would take children out and they'd have Santa Claus on a train. And that gave me the idea, like, hey, how about we put trains on our display to see how that would go over? My original idea was, you know, the little ride-along trains that you can sit on. That's a little too much for our property. But we decided to set up a G-scale train setup, and that has become a huge, huge thing for children. So that was our first couple of years. So each successive year, our attendance just started blossoming. Families, like our second year, families started telling us, like, this is now their yearly tradition. So I got to tell you guys, I don't know if you've had that at your display when somebody's, hey, this is my Christmas tradition. I'm going to come back here every year with my family. That does something to your heart. It's like, wow, that's just incredible that you almost you have to honor that, right? It's like, man, I got to step up my game if this is going to be somebody's tradition. We've had multiple couples become engaged at our display. One night we had twin girls got engaged. I've had 4 proposals inside that tunnel that you guys saw. These people are now bringing their children to the place that they were engaged in. We're seeing grade school children who are toddlers when their first visit. It's just amazing to see those families coming back year after year after year after year. They don't necessarily come to our church, which is fine, but they keep coming back to our display, which is really cool. So we've had explosive attendance and growth. Problem with that is we got some growing pains and we had to do some necessary changes to our facility. On year 3, like I said, our budget, they wanted to give us a $5,000 budget every year for the church. So it prohibited the cost of LED lights, because at the time, each bulb, you guys know, a C9 bulb was about $1 a piece, and a string of 70 to 100 of minis was about 14, 15 bucks a piece. So I mean that cost adds up considerably when you're talking 40,000 to 100,000 lights. But year 3, we were able to start converting over, take the incandescent lights out and converting with our LED refits. We added video mapping to the show. We created a bunch of new props. After the first year, when my first mini, I started seeing RGB props and products. I started drilling, going, oh, that stuff looks really, really cool. So I added some candy canes from a vendor out of Houston. I don't want to mention, but they're pretty cool. So due to the growth in the attendance that we had, we could no longer keep up with donating cookies and cocoa. It's no longer a sustainable option. So the church kitchen, we're actually gifted by a family, upgraded to commercial status. And we got this thing we call the Cookie Monsters, big, huge commercial mixer. So we make huge batches of cookie dough now. And we bake the cookies warm on site. People absolutely go ape over the warm cookies. We actually have a culinary trained chef who runs our kitchen, and he's got a brown butter chocolate chip cookie recipe, which is just, people just absolutely die over that. He also makes a ginger molasses cookie, which is just incredible. What we found out, though, if you go back to that picture of me and Kevin on my walkway, we have a lot of lawn out there. And because the property that we're on, there's actually a couple of springs underneath the ground. So the ground is always wet, even in the middle of summer. It's always squishy. And when you start getting 15, 20, 30,000 people on your lawn, we're actually having people go a foot deep into the mud right in front of our warming hut or barn area. And we realized that was unsustainable. It was inappropriate to invite people onto our property to do that to them. We'd have children fall down the mud and just be totally caked in mud and no way to clean them off. So the church made an investment to put a big, huge, like about 50 or 60-foot square patio out in front of our barn area, so people could stand on the nice concrete area, not have to step in the mud. And once we did that, we were able to provide patio heaters where everybody likes to stand around. Come on. Okay. And because of that, because of the growth, we took this old barn and began remodeling. If you guys remember my pastor talking about a man of vision and prayer, he saw that old barn. He's going, I'm embarrassed that people are, because all we had was just a set of double doors that people walk in. He goes, I want people to be able to stand in out of the rain and watch this place. So he wanted to have some huge glass doors and windows everywhere around the area so people could stand inside in the warm and watch this play. So over a few years, we've actually converted it over. We have some nice large picture windows. We have 2 sets of large glass double doors. We have a big window area over where our train set's at, so the kids can stay outside and watch the train outside. It's pretty cool. We put in, a couple of years ago, we put in a new large River Rock stone fireplace. Add to we call it the pavilion now instead of the barn. And it's really become a quite asset to our property. And with River Rock Display, we added a new photo op destination. Some of you may have known me when we were last in Dallas. My church, while I was in Dallas, our church presented a plan to the congregation that we wanted to upgrade to everything to RGB pixels. And so the church approved a big, huge cash infusion. So we went and basically pixelated the whole 200 by 40 foot building. We added a second 30-foot megapixel tree, and then we created this brand new 50-foot long pixel tunnel. If you guys take a look at the note there on that picture there, you'll see that my lights start about 2 feet up. On my previous tunnel, we had lights come all the way down at the ground. So you guys may have this problem in your area, but we have a lot of rodents and rabbits in our area. And so on the original tunnel, we would have the rabbits come out and chew all the cords and eat up all the lights. So a lot of lights would get destroyed during the course of the season. So what we did with the second tunnel, we raised everything 2 feet off the ground so the rodents wouldn't destroy it. It still looks pretty cool. So each season, our pastors put out an all hands call to the congregation. So we still have a core of about 10 to 20 people now, are kind of a core team. But the pastor puts out a call, so we get about 80 to 100 people help us set up and tear down. So instead of taking 2.5 months to set up display, we can get 90% of the display up in one afternoon. Because when we go back in Creator Props, we made them all modular. So they're just put them up, tear them down, all you have to do, and then we spend the rest of the month plugging everything in and making it work. Our display used to run from the day after Thanksgiving to January 1st. We've now changed it to December 1st to January 1st, and again, we host it up until Christmas Eve. Right now, we use approximately 400 volunteers over the course of the month to host our visitors. This last Christmas season, 2019, we had over 60,000 visitors on our church campus. So like I said, we went from 6,500 people to 60,000 people in 8 years. And basically our township's about 50,000 people. So that's, we had 10,000 people more than our actual city coming, which our display. And the best thing about this, which is my whole point of this display, is that many people have come to faith in Christ just by being introduced to our church via the display. So I put an example of a gentleman named Luke here. So this gentleman, Luke, is a Gulf War vet, got blown up in IED in a Humvee. He survived. Very, very brave man, but he suffers post-traumatic stress disorder. So a couple, 3 years ago, he was now in an argument with God going, God, if you're real, you got to prove something to me. You got to give me something. You got to give me this big flashing light in the sky in my face, right as he drove around the corner and ran into our display. He's like, okay, God, I get the hint. And through that, this gentleman came and watched the show, started coming to church, re-gave his life to the Lord. Just by putting Christmas lights on the building. To me, that's amazing, and that's what it's all about for us. Okay, so that's pretty much the Evergreen Light story. So now I'm going to go on to if you guys want to start your own church display. So I'm sure most of us are pretty doctrinal people. Most of us attend church from what I found out. If you find out right now, we call America's what's described as what a post-Christian society. So I'm turning 59 this week. I grew up in the 60s, grade school. Everybody in grade school went to church when I was a child. It was, instead of, that person doesn't go to church, it was like, my church was better than your church. You don't see that in today's society. I'm sure you guys are well aware that Christianity is thought of negatively and is consistently ridiculed in the media. Just look over this last week and the fight that we've got now when President Trump asked the governors to open up churches, just the uproar in the media. How could he do that? We can open up pot shops and everything else, but we can't open up churches. So Christianity is thought as negative. As I said before, people don't want to be proselytized or preached to. So remember that I said about the people that would sit in their cars and roll their windows up. They didn't want to be approached. They didn't want to be preached at. They didn't want being targeted by a church. So they think if we respond to them, they're going to ask us to join their church. So here in Washington State, 96% of the population of Washington State does not attend church on a regular basis. We're the most liberal and anti-God part of the country. So I ask you, what are the statistics in your state? So I do want to say, of those 96%, some of those are not never seen church. A lot of those are people who are unchurched or de-churched who have been injured by churches. So there's a lot of people out there who have just been hurt by church that need a comfortable, safe home to come back to. And then again, because 96% of our community doesn't go to church. We're not out to steal people from other churches. There's plenty of fish in the sea out there for us to fish in. So this is advice by pastor. So again, the vision, cast your vision. Why? Why are you going to put on a church display? So use that why to inspire who's going to put it on for you and what are you going to do? Then again, build it and they will come. I said our first week of our first display, first year, we had people just drive and see the display, go and lit on the church, and they come driving going, wow, that's cool. What's going on? What's this all about? So turn lights on the building, people will show up. However, you need to take a multi-year approach to build your display. Don't just do it one try and go, oh, that didn't work, or it did work. Then again, what's your motivation for doing this? So Ed asked me to do church display vis-a-vis drive-through. So I'm not have a lot of experience with drive-through, but my question is, do you want to have just a Christian themed wholesome display for families to show up to? Or do you want to make your church display an outreach to your community? And if you are going to do an outreach, how are you going to engage the visitors to your campus? Yeah, okay. So it takes multiple years for people who don't attend a church to feel comfortable coming onto your church property. As I said, our first year, half the people stayed in their cars. Now, they can't wait to get out of the cars. They literally come running to our display. Our executive pastor, 4 years before he started attending our church, he and his wife's very first date was sitting in their car, watching our display with not wanting to be contacted. Now he's our executive pastor because we planted a seed. When he and his wife decided to look for a church, they said, hey, you know what? Let's go back and try that church that had the Christmas lights on it. Now he's our executive pastor and it's changed his life. It takes a while to build a long-term relationship with the viewing public. Trust takes time. There again, you're going to be hosting your neighbors, next door neighbors, across the street, around the town. Our teams are coached on making eye contact with people when they visit. We're coached on how to welcome them and how to invite them to receive a free gift. Our free gift is cookies and cocoa. It's a totally non-threatened way to engage in conversations. People drop their defenses. They're like, what? It's free? Yeah. And while they're standing there, you have a chance to talk to them. So we use our lights simply as a backdrop for conversation. So I'll get into this a little bit when personality conflicts, but some people think it's all about the light show. For me, it's all about the ministry of greeting our visitors and introducing them to Christ. So what's your motivation there? So the lights is a tool to draw people in the community to expose them to Christ in the church. Everything we do at my church is a free gift to our community. We do not pass out invitations to our church events. What we do, we have the video mapping now, so we actually have the pastors greet everybody and say, hey, by the way, Christmas Eve, we're going to have a service. You'd be more than welcome to come. And our church services are this time, and that's on. We leave it at that. Another cool thing we do, and I'll get into it in a couple pages here, is Seattle is such a multicultural community. We actually have people say Merry Christmas in about 10 different languages, post that on the video display, so everybody feels welcome. So once you have visitors on your display, like I said, you don't proselytize to them, don't hand out tracts, just simply ask them, say, hey, how did you find out about our display? Was it in the news? Somebody recommended to you, etc. Then ask them what they think about it. Ask them what their favorite part about it is. And that will start conversations. There again, don't preach to them, don't hand out tracts. Then again, take a 12-month approach for a 1-month event. A lot of you, I'm sure you're like me, you think about Christmas lights and props and everything 365. And that's pretty much what you got to do for this. Another recommendation is for the people who are going to host your events, schedule manageable days and hours for your volunteers to host displays. So my display runs from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. And so a 5-hour shift takes a long time standing on concrete. So if you cut it down to 2.5, 3-hour shifts, people are more than welcome, more than willing to do a short display once or twice a month. Here's a key: pastoral buy-in in church and church leadership is critical. If you don't have the pastors and whoever, if you have a church board, treasurer, elders, all that behind you, it's not going to work. So if they're not buying into it, don't even try it. But if they are behind it, nothing's going to stop you. So now this is part of the naysayers right here. So we've had all these came out of my church. So it costs too much money. What a waste of church finances. In my opinion, just from my experience, this is the best return on investment any church can ever make for an outreach. Like I said, we're the church I am now. We're a church plant of a different church. That church used to send out mailers to the neighborhoods to the tune of $5,000 to $10,000 for 20,000 flyers. And they would get maybe 700 responses. And they thought that was stupendous. We're spending $5,000 to $10,000 and we're getting 60,000 people coming to our show. So what's a soul worth? People say, what a waste of electricity money. We had all these, our first year, oh man, people in the congregation, they were sniping like crazy. What a waste of electricity money. By converting our display to mostly LED and RGB, it only raises our electric bill by around $200, $250 for a 10,000 square foot facility. So drop in a bucket. So you want to start a church. Where are you going to do it? What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? Cast your vision. People have talked to me before about how to start up display. My first question always is, what is your canvas and what is your budget? So there again, are you going to do a drive-through display? Or are you going to promote a stationary display for people to get out of their cars and come out and watch? How are you going to handle parking and traffic handling? There again, how long will your animated display last? My show is on about a 15-minute loop, like 5-song loop. So it takes about 15 minutes. Other people set their displays on the half hour, like 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, etc. So they can get one crowd in, one crowd out. Depends on what time you want to do. What days are you going to run your display? Like I said, we run our displays straight. I work with other churches who do it like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and that's it. So it all depends on what you as a church want to do. One thing you really need to be aware of is children have about a 5-minute attention span watching a light display. I'm talking under 10. Do you have a warm, dry place where people can stand and watch display out of the rain and out of the cold? Probably don't have that problem too much in Florida and the South, but it gets kind of cold and wet up here in the North. Okay. So there again, who's going to lead your project? Is it going to be the pastor? Is it going to be a resident delegate, guru? We have a set person that runs our display. That was Brian that I mentioned earlier. He is the chief man in charge of everything. Do you have somebody in your church who's computer savvy? Somebody that can hook up and navigate to the show software? I was talking to a gentleman earlier that I can plug in lights. I can maybe even program in a couple software versions. But doing the networking and figuring all that stuff out I really flounder there. So I need somebody computer tech savvy, like, IP addresses, that baffles me. I'm figuring it out, but it's taken a while. Is there anybody in your community who no longer uses their controllers? Is there anybody around you who's willing to let you borrow their equipment? Through my experiences in the last 9 years, I've met many people who've gone dark in their displays because of HOA issues. Like Brian, he moved from his one home to a new home that didn't allow that. That's how he came to our church. Traffic problems are just too much effort. So a lot of us here in this forum, we know a lot of people who have been on Great Christmas Light Flight. And generally, a lot of people we know, they have to end up, because of the traffic increase, they ended up shutting their display down 1 or 2 years. There they are with all that equipment. Maybe there's somebody in your community willing to help you establish a show on your site. A new opportunity for them that can't do it at their house anymore. Do you have any tradesmen or women who would be willing to help you build props and set up display? So I'm an example of me of my winding. So about 30 plus years ago, before I started with the Boeing company, I used to wind transformers. So that means I used to wrap copper strap around bobbins, like sewing bobbins, and make transformers. And I used to grumble and gruff about that job. I hated that job. It was terrible. What I didn't realize was the Lord was setting me up to use that skill to create Christmas light props. So when I wound those arches, I was winding again, and I used that skill to create something for the glory of the Lord. So have your lead program, create a master plan of your display, what you want, where it's going to be, how it's going to be laid out. Create some teams to take ownership of zones or elements. So if you're going to make arches, have somebody take ownership of the arches. Somebody's going to make a mega tree. That's his job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is very important. Create a schedule of when and where you're going to set up and tear down your display. If you're going to get help from the congregation or the core team, have a set schedule when everything's going to be. Again, Murphy's Law. So every time we've done this big, huge, massive setup with the congregation, something always goes wrong. So what we learn to do is take a breath, shut it down for the day, move on, come back at it again another day with renewed energy or ideas or plans. Don't feel you have to force it to happen that day. Just take a day off. And if you're doing a big, huge setup day or days, have runners available to go make urgent trips to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever your local Ace hardware store is to get needed supplies, because there's always something we need. Screws, nuts, zip ties, etc. That always somebody forgets to do or just we need more of. Okay, now, so what's your canvas? So by that I mean, what's the best construction elevation of your property that has the best opportunity to install props with dramatic finish? So what's got the best lines of your building that you can set props on? Trim lines, verticals, windows, etc. Where will props go? Do your layering, where your mega tree would go, etc. What's the best side of the building that would happen to affect? Then again, what kind of elements do you want to add to your implement? So everybody loves mega trees. Everybody loves arches. Matrices are becoming huge things. Everybody loves wireframes, core props, wood cutouts, video mapping, animatronics, blow molds, inflatables, snow machines, fog machines, bubble machines. What do you want to add to your display? So our advice is invest well in both hardwired and plugged-in pieces with volunteers and long-term papers in mind. Like I said, you're going to have project owners, but when you get 10 people trying to help you set up something, you got to make it easy for them to set up. So I put the KISS there, so the keep it simple, stupid method, makes up modular and portable, easy to set up, easy to tear down, because you will have people change over from year to year who help you set up and tear down. So many of you know Chuck Smith from Planet Christmas. So I've attended his classes, and one of the things he tells you to do is to create a signature element in your display that's unique to your display. That way people are going to want to come back to it year after year. This is very, very important for a church display, is team building. It takes time to form a team that gels together and works cohesively, personalities. So my project leader, Brian, and I were both type A personalities, we're both leadership personalities, and we've had a few tiffs over the years in front of other people. We actually had to sit down and go have timeouts together in our cars or go have coffee together and hash it out. But just be prepared for that. Because we both have a desire to do a really good job. It's just things get in the way. There again, make it fun. Tensions will rise. Sniping will happen due to frustrations. So remember why you're doing this. The joy will bring to your community. You're doing this to help lead people to Christ. Create multiple elements around the campus that provide photo ops for your visitors to make memories. There again, from Chuck Smith. You're making memories and traditions that will stick with people the rest of their lives. Come on. So there again, what's your target audience? Seattle is a very techie, computer-oriented town now. Seattle is the birthplace of Boeing, UPS, United Airlines, Microsoft, Amazon, Zillow, Starbucks. I live 3 miles from the birthplace of the barcode. We're home to Nintendo. We have a huge biogenetics corridor. We have a huge electronics corridor on the east side of Washington. We have huge Facebook and Google campuses. Washington is now called the world leader in cloud computing. Seattle has a large international community with a strong Asian, Indonesian, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, Laotian, Cambodian, Pacific Islanders, Filipino, Indian, and Russian communities. The largest Hindu temple in the United States is 5 minutes from our campus. So what does your community look like? How will you reach your community? Then again, what kind of music are you going to program to that community, to your audience? So last year, some of you may know the House family from Detroit. I helped them, I was a resource for them to help set up their display, and he was asking me, well, what kind of music should I program? So the community there in Detroit area, they're approximately 40% African American. So I'm not trying to make this any racist. I'm just saying, well, what kind of music would that community enjoy? He goes, well, you know, obviously something from a Black artist. And I said, well, how like Whitney Houston, one of her Christmas songs, and say that, you know what, that's a cool idea. So I think they programmed the Whitney Houston song to reach that target audience. Then again, what kind of a message do you want to portray to your audience? How are you going with the music? If you're going to use video, what kind of messages are you going to broadcast on there? Is your parking area relatively close to your viewing area? So here in Washington, we have two big, huge light displays. This place called the Lights of Christmas is a huge paid viewing property north of me a while, and the parking area is about 6 blocks from the actual entrance to the light display. Then again, this display here, everything's costs money, so it's not charity. It goes to support, they have over 1 million plus lights at this place. And if you take a family of 4 there, you're going to be out of there $100, $150 before you get out of the campus. That's from parking and food and everything, hay rides and et cetera. We have another really popular display called Bellevue Botanical Gardens, where they make figurines and flowers and birds and everything out of Christmas lights. It's totally cool how they make figurines out of it. But then again, the parking area is like 6 to 8 blocks away from the entrance. So is your parking area close to where you're hosting your event? That matters for children. So if you're going to host your event, what does hosting the event look like to you? We've learned that we man zones. So like with my tunnel, we have 2 to 3 people that man inside the tunnel. We have 2 or 3 people manned in our walking display. We have 4 to 5 people inside of our hospitality event just greeting people. We have 4 to 5 people serving cookies and cocoa. And we have 2 to 3 people out on the patio just greeting people, seeing if there's any problems, et cetera, how they can help. And also what we found out with all this is garbage. Garbage cans fill out very fast, so have somebody on garbage can duty. Make sure they check on that. So what does your idea of hosting encompass? For us, it's offering hot cider, cocoa, cookies, candy canes. So when and where would you do this? Are you going to charge, or are you going to give out free gifts? So almost everybody that comes to our display are just totally amazed that it's all free. Like I said, our previous popular display, it's $150 to get in and out. For us, ours is free, and they're just amazed. For as your team, communication among your team is absolutely essential. Have a project leader, but delegate and give people goals to achieve and let them figure it out. So like you said, when I first made my arches, he says, Don, I want you to make arches. So I figured out everything on my own, how to do it. He just provided me the supplies and we got it done. It gives people ownership and pride of what they've built, what they've done. They take ownership like, hey, that's really cool. I built that. That's really cool. So here's a really big key. So now you've created all these props, so a church display, a drive-through display, you make really huge props. Where are you going to put them all when you're done? How are you going to store everything after display's over? Where will you put them to be safe and out of the weather? Our church, our first 2 years, we carried everything inside the church, put them up inside of a little portable roof. We've converted that out. So the church bought us a 45-foot Conex container we now lovingly call the North Pole. We've actually outgrown that. So now we also have to rent a storage facility to handle all our storage bins. What kind of power grid does your facility have? So if you're going to put on display, do you have the circuits? Do you have enough outlets to handle everything for all of your elements and controllers? Over the years at Evergreen, we've had to expand our control panels. We have 2 power rooms that we actually had to add circuits and power outlets to handle everything that we keep adding every year. And GFCI, the den of all lighters, as most people are aware, it likes to rain a lot in Seattle. So puddles and running and mud are a huge challenge for us for all of our extension cords and elements. So do you have that in your area? What can you do to mitigate that? How can you waterproof this best you can? Another thing, during the running of the display, is there anybody on site who knows how to turn off all the trip breakers to keep the show running? So a lot of nights we have half the display go out and nobody's there to go back and turn the GFC vibes back on. So have somebody around every night or who can be called quickly to come and reset. Security. So on our harvest nights, we hire security force to assist with our traffic flow and manpower. What kind of traffic flow pattern are you going to have in and out to your display area? For parking, do you have an entry and exit flow pattern? So with ours, because we get so many people coming, we'll have on our busiest nights we'll get 5,000 to 7,000 people showing up in our 200 car parking lot. So you need to have a pattern in and out. Everybody can't come in and out the same exit. Very important is have a first aid plan and have a station, and like everybody know where the first aid station's at, where you can get band-aids, etc. This next bullet point here is huge for me. Every night I worked my display, we've had a lost child. So make sure you have a lost child reunion point. Make sure everybody knows where it is. So if the child starts crying or the parent starts crying, it's like, hey, we've got your child. He's over here. He's safe. We're on top of it. It happens every night. So that's very, very important. Now, do you need to put up any barricades around any of your elements? So a lot of you know my buddy Kevin that was in my tunnel with me. He's got this picture on display say, this not only will this kill you, it'll hurt the whole time you're dying. So do you need to protect people from getting into anything that can really harm them electronically? We have the potential of unruly guests. It's never been a problem on our display, but there's always that potential. Then again, there's vandalism. So one year we did have somebody steal $1,600 worth of power supplies from us and shut down our whole walking path. That was a pretty big hit to us. So we've taken steps to do that. Then again, a lot of you know my good buddy Mark Zambruski. He's got a how-to on Fort Knox security on his Woodinville Wonderland site on the how-to page. So it's a really good PowerPoint if you guys want to go through that. Want to make sure your area is secure. Okay, what's your budget? Like I said, consider your time as a budget as well as money. You are no longer spending your own money. The money that you're spending has been donated to the church, thereby belonging to the Lord. For me, it's humbling and scary thought to spend that money because you're accountable before the Lord of the finances you spent. We must be good and wise stewards of those finances. As I said before, our initial upfront cost to run our display was $5,000. For a home display, that's a pretty good chunk of change for a 200-foot by 40-foot building. Doesn't go far. What type of lighting can your church afford? Can you only afford incandescent your first couple of years? Can you go LED, RGB? What can you do? Are you guys going to broadcast the music via FM transmitter? So you need to buy a transmitter. What kind of controllers will you need and use? So most everybody in this forum loves Falcon, and I don't blame you. That's like the cream of the crop. Not everybody can afford Falcons. What kind of cords are you going to need? Are you going to need to use commercial grade, like 18, 12, 14 gauge extension cords, or you can make your own SPT cord? Do you have local ordinances or zones that require higher things? Right here, don't be afraid to fail. I want to talk about my $700 screw up. So on the left picture here, you'll see this is my version of a North Pole. On our church campus here on the right, we have these 8 light bollards. And I use these cores to cover up these light bollards. Well, what I did my first year, I thought I was being fancy. I made the pole out of a cardboard concrete core. I fiberglassed each end, resined them, hoping that water wouldn't wick in, and I sprayed them down with automotive paint. In the Seattle rain, they lasted about 3 weeks, and they wrinkled up and shrinked. So it was by the end of the display, it was very, very embarrassing. What I had to do the next year, because the church had reimbursed me for what I spent on those. On my own, I went out and I bought 5-foot, 10-inch wide diameter PVC pipe and remade them out of PVC. So I didn't charge the church for that because I felt that was my screw up. But there again, don't be afraid to screw up. So if you look at them now, you can see them out here. They're pretty dramatic looking event prop. And again, take advantage of any pre-sales you can guys can hook up, group buys, any after Christmas sales to get the best bargains. Is anyone in your area selling used equipment? Keep an eye out on eBay, Craigslist, and Facebook forums for good opportunities. Then again, what software are you going to use? As I said earlier, I know this is an xLight forum, but a lot of shows run the computing software. Also, who's going to supply the show computer? So you guys know a good show laptop is going to run you $500 to $600 for a basic unit, unless you're all going to do it off the pie. And where are you going to put your show computer? Does somebody know on site where the computer is if the program drops? Somebody's talking earlier about LOR crashing all the time. Is there somebody there who can reload LOR at the show? Right here, highlighted backup show. So 4 or 5 years ago, middle of a stormy, rainy night, the computer crashed. We lost everything. So Brian had to literally spend a night redoing our entire show. So I think he worked almost like 20 hours straight rebuilding the show overnight. So my advice, whatever software you're using, back it up. Put it on a storage drive or whatever, SD card. Make sure you got that backed up somewhere. Then again, storage containers. How many are you going to need when everything's done and you go to pack it up? All these little things add up to the price of your display. It's not just the initial, hey, let's buy all these props and set them up. You got to put them somewhere. Does your facility have an outbuilding that can perform hosting and shelter? So if you don't, is there any tent supplies places in your area where you can buy temporary shelter facilities that you can rent? Some of you can tell from my last name that I'm of Scottish descent. So here in Seattle area, we have a summer Highland Games every year. My family used to run it. And for a couple, 3 years, we used to rent like 40 by 100 military surplus tents for shelters that we just had organizers in. Pretty easy, pretty cheap to go for. We originally purchased two 10 by 20 awnings to keep people out of the rain. Problem is they made really good kites because in Seattle, along with the rains, we usually get 2 or 3 good winter storms coming through. We're not too far from the Pacific coast. So we get storms from anywhere from 60 to 100 miles an hour. So those awnings, one time, one picked one right up. I mean, they were staked in the ground really good, picked it up and dropped it right on top of my tunnel, broke the tunnel. So that wasn't really a good option. Do you have any way to supply power and water out to your shelter area? Have patio heaters available for people to stay warm outside. So what does hospitality look like to you and your team? Every visitor that comes to our display is offered the small Brock's candy cane as they enter display, both kids large and small alike. After we give them a candy cane, we offer to take a picture of their family inside of our tunnel. After they're in the tunnel, they're directed to the pavilion so they can enjoy a free cookie and a cup of hot cocoa. Inside the pavilion, they can take pictures of themselves in front of the fireplace. They can watch the display through the window, staying out of the rain and the cold. Or they can enjoy watching our G-scale train set. It's about 20 feet wide by 10 feet deep. It's a pretty neat little thing. This is a huge deal for children. Like I said, children will spend up to 45 minutes to an hour watching the trains. The light show, they get bored with after 5 minutes. So during those 45 minutes, parents need to talk to somebody. That's what gives the opportunity to talk to people. So at each strategic point along our place, we have a host offers to take family photos and provide a friendly, warm greeting. A couple, 3 years ago, we added a new snow machine outside. It has a 15-minute countdown clock outside, and crowds get so excited they'll gather under it and do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they'll get their snowed on for 5 minutes. And it's just become a really huge thing for people. It's really fun. We have our Winter Wonderland walking path outside, shelter. The kids just love to run around. So as you can tell, we're giving them cookies, we're giving them candy canes, we're giving them hot chocolate. We're really sugaring them up, but to get to burn all that energy off by running around the path. On that path, I mentioned earlier, we had 2 twin girls got engaged in front of our silhouette of nativity. A lot of people like to walk right up in that and get their photo taken. But then again, there's a lot of people in our community who have no idea who the lady and the baby and the man are. It's astounding to me that people don't know that. Okay, so due to the high upfront cost of creating a large display like this, considering offer sponsorships for your display, such as local hardware store, machine rentals, local chamber of commerce. If you decide to collect for your charity, make sure it's clearly marked and identified and have a secure place to collect the money, food, and donations. My church does not request any donations from me. As I said, it was free, but many people insist. So we've set up secure donation boxes, which are collected every night and secured. Now, liability. Like I said, my initial fear for running display was liability. It says, do you need to increase your property coverage insurance for the expected increased amount of people that will come on your property? Copyright laws. Most churches that use copyright music for worship pay a fee to use that music. Go ahead and make the effort to add your Christmas music songs added to that permitting service. As I stated earlier, the world hates church, and people who wouldn't sue a homeowner for transmitting music wouldn't think anything of suing a church for the same thing. CYA. Now for drive-through, like I said, I'm not an expert in drive-through, but most drive-throughs greet you at the beginning of the display. Then you have no or minimal contact with the team afterwards. Some require advanced tickets for traffic flow. You may be required to pay a fee to drive through the display. Some may offer candy canes at the entrance. What kind of power grid layout extension cords will you need to support a drive-through display? Some of them are a mile long. That's a lot of work, a lot of setup. These are some of the best drive-through displays in the country right now, Bayside in California, and I think Rama's either in Denver or Chicago area. Watch, listen, and learn. We have a couple drive-through displays in my area, but they're all residential, and they're only manned on Christmas Eve, and they'll collect food. They have Santa Claus outside. So what do you guys want to do with the drive-through? Take advantage of social media for advertising. Use Facebook. My church is huge in social media, so we use Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. There's another service called Christmas Light Finder. I'm not going to get into politics there, but that's a great source for people to find displays in your area. And the key here, prayer. Prayer is absolutely essential for everything you do, setting up a church light display. We begin each setup session with prayer. Every night before the teams go out to host the event, we have a little mini prayer meeting. The really great thing about our display is everyone. They might come in with a sour attitude. Everybody leaves our display with a smile on their face. Young people aren't smiling, or the children crying because they want to still watch the trains. So once again, cast the vision.
Well, Don, I'm sure you can hang around and maybe somebody will have some questions come to mind, but we'd like to thank you for your presentation. Ed had to step out for a minute, so
Sure.
Having no more questions, we really appreciate your time and good luck with your display.